2001, A Space Odyssey, is a challenging film about man's place in the universe and where he is headed. Arthur C. Clarke, who co-authored the screenplay with producer-director Stanley Kubrick, was honored at a press reception prior to the premiere in Los Angeles. Clark Ramsey, vice president of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, introduced the distinguished author.
Mr. Clarke, at least a quarter of a century ago, predicted with rather incredible accuracy the system of communication satellites functioning 22,000 miles above the equator at this moment and known to the world as Telstar and Early Bird. This is really only one of his innumerable major achievements in science, and as the writer of 40 books on space and the ocean, they have won him not only the respect and admiration internationally of science of all nations engaged in the challenge of space and the waters, but of millions of laymen who in 30 languages have thrilled to the adventure of space through the pages of his highly illuminating books. It's a great pleasure to introduce to you now Mr. Arthur C. Clarke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramsey. After all that build-up and with these microphones in front of me, I think I should start by making it clear that I do not seek the nomination. Now, I would like to begin by a number of tributes. First of all, to my colleague for the last 4 years, Stanley Kubrick. It's over 4 years ago that we started work on this, and it's been an extraordinary and exhilarating experience. I think I can safely say that in all that time, we never came to blows. We had no major disagreements. We had all sorts of arguments about the best way of doing things. All these arguments were amicably resolved, and it's looking back on it now, it seems incredible to me that such a complex and lengthy collaboration has gone so smoothly. This is really Stanley Kubrick's movie. I acted as the first stage booster and provided occasional guidance. I'd also like to pay a tribute to MGM and particularly to Mr. O'Brien. They haven't asked me to do this. This is entirely spontaneous. Before I got involved in the world of movies in this country, I had in fact been involved to some extent in the much smaller world of movies in Ceylon, where I live. But until 4 years ago, like most people outside the business, I thought of it as rather commercial and competitive, and which of course it has to be to a large extent. Nevertheless, I was very impressed and touched by the sort of encouragement and by the general treatment that Stanley got from MGM and from Mr. O'Brien, the confidence they showed in him in embarking on this enormous and complex project in which he was often tackling things that had never been done before, in which, in fact, no one, not even Stanley, was certain could be done until he had done them. It's very hard to talk about a movie that none of you have yet seen, and which I myself have only seen in the rushes in all sorts of random orders. So I think what I'll try to do is to say what we were attempting. And of course, I'm speaking, this is my own views. Stanley may have a different approach to some of them. Our aim was to give a mature treatment of the theme of space exploration. Of course, there have been innumerable movies about space in the past. One or two of them were sincere and reasonably successful. Most of them, unfortunately, were, let's not mince words, junk. And I'm afraid to some extent they have prejudiced people against this kind of movie. This is now going to change. Of course, we had several things going for us. Now, space is no longer all fiction. The world has seen the incredible achievements of the last decade. Only last Friday, I was at the 10th anniversary dinner of all the Vanguard people in Washington. And it does seem incredible. It's just 10 years ago last week that the first Vanguard was launched into orbit. It wasn't the first American satellite, of course. The Explorer 1 preceded it, but the first Vanguard satellite, which was this big and weighed 4 pounds, went into orbit 10 years ago. Last year, the first Saturn V payload, weighing 140 tons, went into orbit, and the next Saturn V, all 3,000 tons of it, is standing on the pad right there, due to be launched just before the Washington premiere. And I don't know if I should tell you this. It shouldn't be reported, perhaps, but the Apollo Management Committee has rescheduled their meeting so they can get to the premiere. What we were trying to do was to convey the wonder and the beauty and, above all, the promise of space exploration, this great new frontier that's opening up in our age and probably just in time. However, besides doing this, at the same time, we were tackling an even more ambitious theme, and this was nothing less than an attempt to convey the possible, indeed the probable, place of man in the hierarchy of the universe, in, if you like, the cosmic pecking order. It's been taken for granted by scientists for many years now that life is common throughout the universe, and that probably intelligence is also common. This idea has not reached the public, which associates it purely with fiction, but this is not fiction. And it's time this was realized, just as a few hundred years ago the world had to realize, people had to realize that this earth was not the center of everything. We are probably pretty low on the cosmic totem pole. So in this movie, Stanley Kubrick has attempted to span really an unprecedented range of ideas right back to our origins, the origins of the human race 3 million years ago. This in itself is a tremendous challenge to any movie maker, and I have seen this Dawn of Man footage, which I think is in itself going to be historic. But from these beginnings, which are based on the recent discoveries of the origin of man, particularly by Dr. Leakey in Africa, we go on to the year 2001, which is only, of course, 33 years ahead of us, and try to convey the technology that will exist then, or that may exist. We've had great cooperation from the aerospace industry. I think the care and attention to detail that has been given to the equipment, to the hardware in this movie is quite unprecedented. And this establishes, I think, a sense of realism which will make it impossible to believe that the year 2000 is not going to be like this. I seriously thought that we may have a profound effect on spaceship design in the years to come. People will be doing things they saw in this movie, even real spaceship designers, even though it may not be the best way of doing it, they will sort of unconsciously be affected by some of the concepts. Literally scores of industrial firms who have given them their time and their experts, so that the final result does have this feeling of reality, of solidity. Yet at the same time, I do want to stress that this is not documentary. You need this realistic background to establish the basis on which the adventure and the excitement of the movie can take place, so that people accept that these things may be so. And in the end of the movie, in the incredible final sequence, we go beyond today's science, as we must, into a realm which I think can best be described as spiritual. And here we're up against a very difficult problem, because, you know, in the last few weeks there's been this tremendous excitement among the astronomers over the extraordinarily precise and rhythmic radio pulses coming from the direction of the point between Vega and Altair, which may yet turn out to have a natural explanation, but its periodicity and characteristics are so extraordinary that no explanation as yet seems very feasible. Sooner or later, we expect we will receive proof that other intelligence exists in this universe. This may come next week. It may not come for 100 years. But I think this movie will serve, besides its purpose as entertainment, it may help to prepare the human race for something that inevitably will come. Thank you.